Hello students, so we'll begin with the next part of our lecture, that is on development of cardiovascular system. We'll be doing this lecture under these headings. We'll be completing the heart tube, its formation, the parts, the looping of heart, along with the atrioventricular canal and the AV cushions. We'll be doing the sinus venosus and development of atria and ventricle with detailed development of the interatrial septum. In the second part of our lecture, in next time, we'll be doing the rest of the portion like interventricular septum and the conotruncal septum. And in the last CVS 3, we'll be completing the fetal circulation and aortic arches. So what is the cardiovascular system? The cardiovascular system is comprised of the heart and the vascular system. Now, initially, if you have seen this in earlier also this picture, during the initial weeks of development, that is till third week of development, till first to 3 weeks of development, the nourishment of the embryo is primarily because of the diffusion, which is through the amniotic cavity or through the extra embryonic coelom or through the primary and the secondary yolk sac. But by the mid of the third week, there is increase in the functional demand of the growing embryo. So to match up that growing embryo demand, the blood vascular system has to develop. The blood vascular system, which is which forms by the beginning of the third week, the first blood vascular system that establishes is the extra embryonic vascular system, and this is followed by 2 days later by the formation of the intra-embryonic vascular system. So both the blood vessels, the vascular system and the heart have the mesodermal origin. Now let's talking about the extraembryonic blood vascular system first. So as I've told you that by the early part of the third week, the first vascular system that arises is the extraembryonic blood vascular system, which develops in the extraembryonic mesoderm. Extraembryonic mesoderm in relation to the yolk sac wall, in relation to the connecting stalk area, and in relation to the chorion. So the vessels that are formed, the vascular system that is formed in relation to the yolk sac wall forms the vitelline vessels, both artery and vein. In relation to the connecting stalk area, this is the area where the vessels that are formed is forming the umbilical vessels. And you know, with the villus, you know where the chorionic vessels are present in relation to the placenta. The intra-embryonic blood vascular system is the vascular system which develops in the intra-embryonic splanchnic mesoderm. So this is the intra-embryonic splanchnic mesoderm where the intra-embryonic vasculature are developing. This will lead to the formation of longitudinal vessels which are called as the dorsal aorta. These intra-embryonic vascular system, which forms at the end of the later part of the third week, later communicates with the extraembryonic vascular system. So we have talked about one aspect of cardiovascular system, that is the vascular system. Now coming to the heart, that is the cardiac part. So the cardiac or the heart is formed from a precursor which is called as the cardiac progenitor cells. These cardiac progenitor cells are located in the epiblast, which is just lateral to the primitive streak area. These cardiac progenitor cells, which were present in the epiblast, then migrate cranially in an orderly sequence. This is the orderly sequence in which they migrate. And where do they migrate? They migrate in the deeper layer, which is the splanchnopluric layer of the intraembryonic mesoderm. Here in the intraembryonic mesoderm splanchnic layer, they are arranged in a form of a horseshoe-shaped cluster of cells. These horseshoe-shaped cluster of cells, which are the primordium of the heart, these are called as the primary heart field. And this is the order in which they are moving in the cranial direction. This is also synonymous with the laterality. This also corresponds with the laterality of the body axis, which is left to right axis. So we have seen how this primary heart field has been formed. So it is by 16 to 18 days, The primary heart field has formed, which is horseshoe shaped because of the migration of the cells which have reached the splenic mesoderm, intraembryonic splenic mesoderm, and they come in relation cranial to the buccopharyngeal as well as the neural fold. These are the primary heart field which is going to form, responsible for the formation of atria, left ventricle, and most of the right ventricle. So the laterality, left and right sidedness will also be dependent upon the pattern of sequencing, pattern of migration of these primary heart field. Any disruption may lead to the inverse relation, that is left right sidedness will be disrupted and will lead to the opposite sequencing of the heart field. The secondary heart field is the second portion which develops in 20 to 21st day. This also develops in the splanchnic mesoderm, which is ventral to the posterior pharynx. Ventral to the posterior pharynx in the splanchnic mesoderm. This is responsible for the formation of the major part of the formation of the rest of the part of the right ventricle and the majorly the outflow tract, which will understand what are those outflow tract. They are termed conus cordis and truncus arteriosus. And this also shows the exhibits the laterality. So any disruption in the initial stages, that is the primary heart field and secondary heart field migration, can lead to left to right disruption into left to right patterning. Now we have seen how the primary heart field developed. Now this primary heart field, now let's see its relation. Its relation is initially it is cranial to the developing neural fold, the neural plate, and the buccopharyngeal membrane. This is the area of the buccopharyngeal membrane. So this is cranial to both buccopharyngeal membrane as well as to the growing neural plate and the neural fold. So this over here is the primary heart field. Now, as we know, the heart is not cranial to the buccopharyngeal membrane or the future mouth. This buccopharyngeal membrane is the future mouth. So our heart is not in adults, it is lower down. So how this primary heart field shifts its position? So the heart field is going to shift ventrocaudally. This ventrocaudal shift, how it is brought about? It is brought about by the growth of this is the head end. So this is the enlarged view of the head end. So the brain is growing. When the brain is growing, the enlarged brain extends cranially over the cardiogenic area. So the cardiogenic area, which was initially in the cranial to the buccopharyngeal and the neural plate, now because of the growing brain and the growing neural folds, this and the head fold, this cardiogenic area, this head fold area or the growth of the brain area is now becoming cranial. Now, second thing is also happening, that is the cephalocaudal folding or the craniocaudal folding. This is the craniocaudal folding which is happening, and because of this, the buccopharyngeal membrane is pulled forwards. This was the cranial buccopharyngeal membrane initially, now it is pulled forward. So now you can see that the buccopharyngeal membrane has come forward. The heart tube which was lying initially dorsal to the pericardial cavity. This was the developing pericardial cavity. With the intraembryonic coelom, we did this pericardial cavity. So initially this was dorsal to the heart tube was dorsal to the pericardial cavity, but because of this shift, we can see the heart and the pericardial cavity both are going to shift ventrocaudally and will reach the cervical region first and then finally reaches the thoracic area. The lateral folding will also lead to some changes, that is the heart tube which is forming in a pair, that is on left and the right side. Because of the lateral folding, they will merge and form a single cardiac primordium. So now we know in these pictures also how the heart tube which was cranially located has gone ventrocaudally and is now situated over here. So the pericardial cavity, the heart tube, which is in relation to the pericardial cavity, this relation is also changing. So heart tube is now going to invaginate into the pericardial cavity from its dorsal side. When the heart tube is invading the pericardial cavity, what is happening is the heart tube is attached to the dorsal cavity by a dorsal mesocardium. So this is how the two paired heart tube, because of the lateral folding, they are fused to form a single heart tube. This is a single endocardial tube which has formed because of the lateral folding, and this is the still the attachment by which the heart tube is still attached to the dorsal side of the pericardial cavity. This is like a mesentery, and this is called as a dorsal mesocardium. But by the end of the 4th week, what happens is this also disappear, and this leads to formation of transverse pericardial sinus, which has very important relation in the gross anatomy, which you will see, where you will see in the heart when you place your finger, that will be shown to you how to feel for the transverse pericardial sinus. So this transverse pericardial sinus is formed by disappearance of this dorsal mesocardium by end of the 4th week. So now the pericardial cavity, the heart is now, after the disappearance of this dorsal mesocardium, the heart will be freely suspending in the pericardial cavity through its cranial and caudal ports. So this is that transverse sinus that I was talking about. This in gross you will learn. Then when you place your finger in between the pulmonary artery and the aorta in front and the pulmonary veins behind, this is the sinus that you reach. This is a transverse sinus, which signifies the area where the dorsal mesocardium has disappeared and led to the continuity of both the pericardial cavity. Now, a brief about the heart tube wall before we do the heart tubes. The heart tube, if we cut the heart tube, we'll find that if we go from inner to outer, the innermost layer is the endocardium layer, which is the internal endothelial lining of the heart. This is followed by a muscle layer, which is called as the myocardium, and the outermost is the epicardium, which is the protective layer. The epicardium is basically the visceral pericardium, and we all know how the visceral pericardium is developed. It is developed from the splanchnic mesoderm. So the splanchnic or the splanchnopleuric mesoderm is going to develop into the visceral, going to form the visceral layer of pericardium or the epicardium along with the myocardium. This myocardium also forms from the thickening of the myoepicardial mantle, which is from the splanchnopleuric mesoderm. The somatic mesoderm, intraembryonic somatic mesoderm, is what is going to form the parietal layer of the pericardium. Now we move on to the main part, that is the heart tube, how the heart tube has formed. So initially we said that the heart tube formed in form of a paired tube on both the sides, but because of the lateral folding, they merged together. So this is how they merged. So they fused to form a single tube. But in the meantime, they when these heart tube is developing, they show series of dilatations. What are these dilatations of heart tube? These series of dilatation, if we trace from superior to inferior, this in this picture, this is showing the heart tube, which is now merged. The two tubes have merged, and this dotted line is representing the pericardial cavity. As I've told you, the heart is suspended into the pericardial cavity, and it's through its cranial and the caudal pole, it is suspending freely into the pericardial cavity. Now, the parts of the heart tube, which is often asked to you in your exam again and again, these are the bulbus cordus, the ventricle, the atrium, and the sinus venosus. So this is the initial part, initial portion where the heart is represented in a tube-like fashion in earlier life, in the fetal period. This is how the heart will appear. Now, you can see in the next following two pictures, this tube is undergoing some folding process. We'll come to it later. So as we were talking about the heart tube, this was the bulbus cordus area, followed by the ventricle and the atrium and the sinus venosus. These were the four areas of the heart tube. If we look carefully into the bulbus cordus, this is further subdivided into three areas, from proximal, middle, and the distal part of the bulbus cordus. So let's see the proximal 1/3. The proximal 1/3 part of the bulbus cordus is quite wider. The middle part is called as the conus cordus. And the distal 1/3 is called as the truncus arteriosus, and it is continuous with the arterial system. The lower pole is venous system of the heart tube. So now we know the three different areas of the bulbus cordus. Now let's see what these areas are developing into. The proximal 1/3 part, which is wider part, is going to form the trabeculated part of the right ventricle. The middle part of the bulbus cordus, which is called as the conus cordus, is going to form the outflow part of both right ventricle and the left ventricle. The distal part, truncus arteriosus, forms the roots and proximal portion of the aorta and the pulmonary artery. And this is in continuation with the arterial system at its superior pole. So these are very important derivatives of the bulbus cordus. Now, as I was talking about the two poles of the heart. So this is the cranial pole, and this is the caudal pole. Now look into the cranial pole first. The cranial pole is the pole from where the blood will be pumped out. out of the first aortic arch into the dorsal aorta. So this is the cranial pole. And this is a caudal pole which is going to receive the venous blood. So this is for the venous drainage. Through the sinus venosus, it reaches the atria. Now, what is bulboventricular sulcus? So we have done till here in this first picture, we know the parts of the heart tube. And then I said that this tube is going to fold. So this is how the tube is going to fold. The tube will be folded by appearance of certain sulci over here, certain grooves. So this is the first groove or the sulcus which appears, that is the bulboventricular sulcus. As the name suggests, it should be between the bulbus cordis and the ventricle cavity. This is a primitive ventricular cavity. So between the bulbus cordis and the primitive ventricular cavity, this sulcus which is appearing externally onto the heart tube, this is called as the bulboventricular sulcus, which is also called as primary interventricular foramina. So by this you can easily confirm that this bulboventricular sulcus is going to future form the interventricular area. So this is between the two ventricles. So this is right now the bulbus cordis and the ventricle. So in this picture, after the folding, you can see this is that bulboventricular sulcus we were talking about, and the corresponding bulboventricular flange will be seen from the internal aspect. So by this knowledge, now let's start the looping of heart, which is called as the cardiac loop. So the parts of heart tube we are well aware of. Now let's see how this is forming from the tube, how it is actually gaining the adult position of the heart, because in adult the heart is not in the form of a linear tube. It is somewhat in a form of a it has a pyramidal structure. So how does it forms? By this cardiac loop, it gains it forms its original shape and its position. So let's see how it forms the loop. So the first sulcus that I was talking about, this is the bulboventricular sulcus between the bulbus cordis and the ventricle that appears. The second sulcus appears at the junction where the ventricle is in communication with the atrium. So this is that first sulcus, the bulboventricular sulcus. So the heart tube, when this bend appears? This bend appears early in the 4th week by day 23, when the heart tube has quite elongated. And why do the bend appears? Why? Because the heart tube is suspended in the pericardial cavity, and because of the elongation of the tube, there will be no space left in the pericardial cavity. So that is why the heart tube will bend. Now this the cephalic bend, this cranial bend, is the bulboventricular sulcus between the bulbus cordis and the ventricle. The second bend, which is appearing between the ventricle and the common atrium. So these bends create the cardiac loop, which is completed. This loop is completed by day 28. So this because of this looping, what will happen? Two tubes will be formed. One will be the cephalic tube, which is the bulboventricular tube. So this is the bulboventricular tube, and the other is the caudal tube, which is the atrial tube. Bulboventricular and atrial tube, these have been created, and there will be shift of this. Once these tubes have been created, what will happen? This bulboventricular tube, that is the bulbus cordis and the ventricle is together. They are going to bend ventrally, caudally, and to the right, whereas the caudal tube, that is the left atrium, is going to shift dorsally, cranially, and to the left. So remember these two directions where these two tubes have been created because of these two sulci, and this is how the tube is going to shift. Because we know that atria in adult is not inferior, the atria has to go up, the ventricles have to go down. So this is how the original shape, the adult position is acquired by the folding, in which the caudal tube is shifting dorsally, cranially, and to the left. What happens to the cranial heart tube while this bulboventricular tube that we were talking about? This bulboventricular tube that is growing ventrally, caudally, and to the right. This creates a U-shaped loop. This is the U-shaped loop. These are the models that we have in our department of the heart tube and this U-shaped loop of the bulboventricular tube. So this is that U-shaped loop of the bulboventricular tube, which has a right limb and the left limb. The left limb will be the ventricles, the right limb will be the bulbus cordis, synonymous with this in picture. Now let's see what happens to the caudal part of the tube. So the caudal part of the heart tube, which is the atrium, this has to shift cranially and to the left, and dorsally also. So these both chambers, now in the next picture, look over here, this has migrated up. So these are the two primitive atrial chambers which have now migrated dorsal in relation to the ventricles and have become cranial in relation to the ventricles as well. So these are the left atrium in this picture, how they have shifted cranially and dorsally. Now what happens to the conotruncal part? The conotruncal part, which is initially on the right side of the pericardial cavity, now shifts more to the medial aspect. And this is because of the two transverse dilations which are appearing in the atrium. So this picture summarizes the heart tube loop formation, how from a tube-like structure, the cardiac tube or the heart tube, how it has folded by formation of two sulci or the groove, bulboventricular and another sulcus between the ventricle and the atria, how this U-shaped tube has been formed. This U-shaped tube is the bulboventricular tube, which is the cranial tube of this folded loop formed by the bulbus cordis and the ventricle. The second is the second part, the caudal part of this loop, that is the atrium, has to shift, migrate dorsally and cranially. So this is how they have migrated. So in this, the light pink pictures are of the atrium, which has shifted now cranially. So ultimately, this is how it acquires. So which we started the tube with the bulbus cordis, the truncus arteriosus, the bulbus cordis, ventricle, and atrium in this fashion. And now the atria are located superiorly, cranially, and dorsally. In between, the truncus arteriosus is there, followed by the bulbus cordis and the ventricle. So bulbus cordis, which is forming the right ventricle, and the ventricle, which is going to form the left ventricle. This is how, in this picture, this again is showing how this shift of bulboventricular and the caudal part, that is the atrial part, the two lines of looping, this is representing. And this is representing the heart tube, the pericardial cavity in relation to the septum transversum and the peritoneal cavity. So this is how from the two paired tubes, how they fused. And when they fused, they formed this fused tube. And this fused tube then undergone looping, the cardiac loop formed, and this is how the actual heart is now reaching its adult position. And the beginning part was from this cardiogenic area in this planknopleuric mesoderm, which started in the epiblast area. So we complete the heart tube. So now let's quickly see this quiz, and you should be able to identify all these portions of the heart tube. This is definitely a heart tube. So what are these portions of the heart tube? So this is the answer, and then you should be able to tell that all the three parts of the bulbus cordis also, that is the truncus arteriosus, conus, and the bulbus cordis. Now we come to the heart tube orifices. The heart tube orifices are sinoatrial orifice. This is the sinoatrial orifice. This is the heart tube which has been cut sagittally in such a way that this is the atrial cavity and this is the primary primitive ventricular cavity. And this is the sinus venosus area. So this is the orifice which is between the atrium and the sinus venosus. So this is a sinoatrial orifice. The other orifice is this atrioventricular canal, which is between the atrium and the primitive ventricle. So this is the atrioventricular canal. So this in brief is the all portions of the heart tube. And this is the fate of the heart tube that we discussed till this portion, how the distal of the proximal 1/3 was forming the trabeculated, the primitive right ventricle, the middle 1/3 was forming the outflow tracts of right and left ventricle, and the distal 1/3 was forming the ascending aorta and pulmonary trunk, the proximal portions. Rest derivatives we are going to come in sequential order. So we have done about done a lot about the heart tube. Now coming to the dorsal aorta, they are the paired endothelial vessels which extend caudally into the body stalk, and the cranial ends of the dorsal aorta curve ventrally around the sides of the foregut. This is how the aortic sac and the dorsal aorta has been represented in this picture. Now the venous end. The venous end is, suppose this is the heart tube. This is the sinus venosus end, and this is the procranial end, and this is the area of the aortic dorsal aorta, the aortic end, the arterial end, and this one over here in the caudal pole, this is the venous end or the venous trunk. This is formed by joining of three veins, that is from the yolk sac area, this is the vitelline vein, from the connecting stalk area, this is the umbilical vein, and from the body wall, this comes the common cardinal vein. So these joining of all these happens at the horns of the sinus venosus. So this is the venous trunk. So this leads, so before that, let's do the molecular regulation. Molecular regulation, the what is important over here is NKX 2.5, which is involved in the septation of heart, which is a very important part of our today's lecture. That is the atrial septal defect, which we'll be doing today. So now we were talking about the venous drainage of the heart. So we talked about the sinus venosus, the venous trunk. So this is the sinus venosus area in the developing heart tube, which is caudal to the atrium. So atrium actually receives this venous end. The right atrium, you know, receives the superior inferior vena cava, and the left atrium receives the pulmonary veins. So how this sinus venosus is developing, let's see. So the sinus venosus has two parts. One is the body of the sinus venosus, and there are two horns of the sinus venosus. This is the left and the right horn of sinus venosus. So how the sinus venosus, by the middle of the 4th week, the sinus venosus is receiving the venous blood from the right horn and the left horn of the sinus venosus. So this is the right and the left horn of the sinus venosus. Each horn, so this is the horn, right and the left horn. Each horn, if we say about the over this side, that is the right side of the sinus venosus, it receives from medial to lateral, it receives vitelline vein from the yolk sac, the umbilical vein from the placenta, and the common cardinal vein from the body wall, which is in the form by the fusion of anterior and posterior cardinal vein. So the three venous system, that is the vitelline vein, umbilical vein, and the common cardinal vein, which is formed by the joining of posterior and anterior cardinal vein from the body wall, they enter the each respective horn of sinus venosus. And this, in this picture, if we see in totality, this is the area of the sinus venosus where these three venous systems, the vitelline, umbilical, and the common cardinal veins are draining the venous blood from the yolk sac, placenta, and body wall. Horns same size. But later on, because of the left to right shunts in the venous system, which appears by 4th to 5th week, most of the blood is drained into the right horn of the sinus venosus. So the right horn of sinus venosus is going to be enlarged, become enlarged, and the left is obliterated gradually. So how this right horn of sinus venosus, this is the right horn of sinus venosus. What happens is the right umbilical vein disappears. And also what happens is left to right shunts is happening. So the right horn of sinus venosus is enlarging. So it becomes the major communication between the initial sinus venosus and the atrium. This right horn becomes the major communication between the sinus venosus and the atrium. And it is receiving the blood from the vitelline veins. It is receiving blood from the common cardinal vein, and it also receives blood from the left horn of sinus venosus, because the left horn of sinus venosus is gradually disappearing, it is obliterating, and instead of going into the sinoatrial chamber, it is acting as a tributary into the right horn of sinus venosus. So this is now very important. What happens next is this enlarged right horn of sinus venosus is incorporated into the right. This is a posterior view. So this is the right atrium into which the right horn of sinus venosus is absorbed into the wall of the right atrium, and this forms the smooth part of right atrium, which is called as the sinus venerum. So sinus venerum is a smooth part of the right atrium, which is formed by the absorption of the right horn of sinus venosus. The second thing that we said was the obliteration of left horn of sinus venosus. So gradually what is happening, this is becoming larger right horn, the left horn is obliterating, and ultimately it acts as a tributary into the right horn itself. So this, by during the 5th week, the left horn of sinus venosus is obliterating. And this happens because of the obliteration of the corresponding its tributaries, like the left umbilical vein, left vitelline vein, they are disappearing. The only vein that is now draining into the left horn is the common cardinal vein, and together this left horn drains into the right horn of sinus venosus now. So after obliteration at 10 weeks, whatever is left, this is what is left from the left horn, is only the oblique vein of left atrium and the coronary sinus, which you are definitely going to see in the gross part of the thorax. So these are the two derivatives of the left horn of sinus venosus, the oblique vein of left atrium and this big sinus over here. This is the coronary sinus. So these, the coronary, the right and the left venous, the right horn of sinus venosus is guarded. If you see from the atrial chamber part, it is guarded by the right venous valve and the left venous valve. So this is the sinoatrial orifice, which is opening into the common atrial chamber over here, the right horn of sinus venosus, and flanked by the right venous valve and the left venous valve. These venous valves fuse to form the septum spurium in the cranial part. So when the we said the right horn of sinus venosus is absorbed into the right atrium. This is the right atrium. So you can see this blue portion, which is the absorbed part of the sinus venosus, right horn of sinus venosus. So this is going to form the sinus venerum, the smooth part of right atrium. The left venous, what will happen to the left venous valve? The left venous valve will fuse with the septum, will fuse with the septum spurium, and the left venous valve will fuse with the atrial septum. With the developing atrial septum, this is going to fuse. These are again important, the derivatives of the right and left venous valve. The right venous valve is divided by the crista terminalis, is divided by superior and inferior limbic bands into 3 parts. The superior part forms the crista terminalis, which is the dividing part between the smooth part of the right atrium and the rough part. The second, it develops into the valve of inferior vena cava and the valve of coronary sinus. This is how it develops into the crista terminalis, valve of inferior vena cava and valve of coronary sinus. The left venous valve, we have just said, it together with septum spurium, it is going to fuse with the septum secundum, interatrial septum. Now this is the model that we have in our department. So these two will be, if it's a posterior view, these will be the right and the left horn of sinus venosus, and you should know the derivatives of them. And this is the place where the coronary sinus is situated in the adult, and this is the right atrial wall. This is from the posterior view. Now coming to the atrioventricular canal, which is actually a communication between the common atrial chamber and the ventricular chamber. There are two cushions by the end of the 4th week, anterior and posterior. This is the cut section through the atrio. So this is the atrioventricular canal. So this is the cut section through it. So two swellings appear: the superior endocardial cushion or the anterior endocardial cushion, inferior endocardial cushion or the posterior endocardial cushion. These two appear and fuse to divide this atrioventricular canal into right and left atrioventricular canals. There are also two lateral cushions which are appearing, which are right and the left, but they do not fuse with each other. Right and left do not fuse. Only the anterior posterior or the superior inferior fuse with each other. And when they fuse, they create two canals, independent canals. And these AV cushions take part in the formation of interatrial septum and interventricular septum, which will come when we'll do the septum, formation of septum. So this is how the AV cushions looks like in the R model, and the atrioventricular valve in atrioventricular canal area. This is how the development of the valves happens. On the left side forms the bicuspid, and on the right side forms the tricuspid valve. So by this, now we can say that the right atrium is derived from the primitive atrium, which forms a rough trabeculated part, which is in front of crista terminalis, And by absorption of right horn of sinus venosus, it will form the sinus venerum or the smooth part of the right atrium. Similarly, the left atrium, the pulmonary veins which enter, when these pulmonary veins are their proximal part, when they get absorbed, is going to form the posterior smooth part. And the main rough anterior part is formed by the primitive atrial chamber. These are the fetal heart dissection that was done in our department. Development of the ventricles. Now, in the ventricles, this we'll do in detail in the next part when we'll be doing the septum in the ventricles. So now coming to the major part of today's lecture, which is the septum formation in the interatrial region. So this is how the septum can form in a heart. The septum can be formed when the two actively growing ridges are coming in contact with each other and they are growing towards each other. This is one of the way by which the septum can be formed in the heart. Example, we have just learned that the anterior and posterior AV cushions or cranial that were called the superior and the inferior and atrioventricular cushions, that when they were merging together, they were creating this. So this atrial and ventricular, the AV cushions, atrioventricular cushions will be the septum will be formed in this manner. The second way is when the septum is formed when a single actively growing cell merges with the opposite side. This happens at the conotruncal region. Aortic and pulmonary channels are thus separated by the conotruncal cushions. This is the third way by which the septum can be formed. In this, what happens is this is actively growing areas of the expanding tubes of heart, but in the central part, you can see this is not growing. So what will happen? The part which is not growing will appear like a crest or a ridge. This will create a septum. This happens with the interventricular and interatrial muscular part of septum. So we have seen three different processes by which the septum formation can take place. Combination of these all processes will lead to the formation of septum in the heart. So now coming to the most important part of our lecture, which comes as a question also, is the formation of interatrial septum. So we know that the primitive atria was there, and the primitive atria has to be divided into a right atrium and a left atrium. This division is formed by the formation of the interatrial septum, and this septum is this is the process. So first is the formation of septum primum, followed by formation of ostium primum, ostium secundum, septum secundum, foramen ovale, formation of foramen ovale, and then obliteration of foramen ovale. So just learn these 6 steps for the formation of interatrial septum. We'll go one by one explaining each process. So pay attention carefully. So the first step, which is the formation of septum primum. So this is the right atrium, this is the left atrium and the ventricles. This is the superior wall. So remember when we saw the different types of septa formation, I told you that the expanding areas of the heart grows and the non-expanding area which fails to grow forms the septum. So this is what is happening in over here, leading to the formation of septum primum. So this is how the septum primum is formed between the right atria and the left atria. But this septum, which is growing from the superior wall, is not complete, leaves a gap below, which is called as the ostium primum. So let's see in this picture first. What should be this in the center? This should be the atrioventricular. These are the two atrioventricular canals, and this should be the AV cushions, atrioventricular endocardial cushions. So the septum primum is formed by the end of the 4th week. And what is septum primum? Septum primum is a sickle-shaped fold. So this is a coronal section through the heart, and look into here now. This is a sagittal section through the heart. So we can see the septum primum in the atrial cavity, and this is the ventricular cavity. And this in the center is the endocardial cushion. So this is the anterior part and this is the posterior part. So this over here should be anterior endocardial cushion, and this should be the posterior endocardial cushion. From the superior wall of the atrium, this red area, this is the septum primum. So this is, you can see the fold is sickle shaped. This septum is sickle shaped and it arises from the roof of the common atrial chamber and grows towards the lumen of the atrium. If you look carefully, it has got an anterior horn and a posterior horn. This is the anterior horn of the septum primum, which reaches the anterior AV cushion. The posterior horn reaches the posterior AV cushion. Now, this is the second step, formation of ostium primum. So, once the septum primum was formed, so between the septum primum and the AV cushion, this is the area of ostium primum. So, what is ostium primum? The ostium primum, or the space, this is a space opening between the lower rim of the lower margin of the septum primum and the endocardial cushion. So, these are the endocardial cushion. In this view, also between the endocardial AV cushions and the septum primum, this space is the ostium primum. Now what happens is this, because with the further development, the anterior and posterior endocardial cushions grow towards each other and try to fuse the ostium primum. So closure of ostium primum takes place. But before this closure is complete, before it closes completely, some cell death appears in the upper portion of the septum primum. So in the upper portion of septum primum, before this ostium primum is closed by the growth of the endocardial cushion, there is regression, or there is cell death at the superior part of the septum primum. These perforations in the septum primum coalesce together, joins, and forms a cavity. This is called as this opening is called as the ostium secundum. So basically what ostium secundum is, the perforations of the septum primum. When they join together, they form the ostium secundum. So this is how it appears in this section also. So ostium primum was the opening between the lower rim of septum primum and the AV cushions. But the septum secundum is the perforations of the upper part of the septum primum. So this is formed by the end of the 5th week. Now we come to the 4th step, which is the formation of the septum secundum. So the septum, once this is the ostium secundum, which is the perforations in the upper part of the septum primum, and you can see before the ostium primum has closed, you can see ostium primum is no more here. It has been closed. Before that, this ostium secundum has formed. So now when now what happens is right atrium is also expanding. Why it is expanding? Because of the incorporation of right horn of sinus venosus. We have seen with the development of right atrium, the right horn of sinus venosus was absorbed into the right atrium. So this right atrium is now expanding more. Because of this, another fold of expansion, because of this expanding area, another area which fails to grow, that forms a septum, which is the septum secundum. Now how to remember in this picture, which is septum secundum, which is primum? Towards to the right side will be the septum secundum, and to the left side will be the septum primum. Always remember that. Now this septum secundum is also this septum secundum is also growing from the roof of the common atrial chamber, and this is how it grows. And it is this is the anterior and the posterior limb of the septum secundum as well. So the anterior limb is growing much more as compared to the posterior limb. This is growing much more and is extending downwards towards the AV canal. Now we come to the 5th step, that is formation of foramen ovale. So when the left venous valve and the septum, this was the left venous valve and this was the septum spurium. When this left venous valve and septum spurium fuses with the right side of the septum secundum, this is the septum secundum in this, and we said that the left venous valve and the septum spurium, they fused with the septum secundum. So once they have fused, what will happen? This septum secundum will become more enlarged because of the fusion of all these structure, and this will now it will overlap the ostium secundum. So this over here was the ostium secundum. This was the septum secundum that formed after the formation of ostium secundum. This septum secundum is overlapping what? It is overlapping the ostium secundum, and this opening which is now left is called as the foramen ovale. So this is the foramen ovale now. So you can see this, the septum secundum has the anterior horn of the septum secundum has reached the AV canal, AV endocardial cushion. And this is that septum secundum after its growth. This part is going to overhang the ostium secundum, and this portion is called as the foramen ovale. Now, when the upper part of the septum primum, you can see the upper part of the septum primum gradually is going to disappear. What will remain is the septum primum will remain in the lower part. The upper part is gradually disappearing. The remaining part of the septum primum after the disappearance of the upper part of the septum primum is going to form the valve of foramen ovale. This is called as a valve of foramen ovale. So now an obliquely elongated cleft has been left, which is a passage between the two atrial cavity. This is that oblique cleft-like area. This oblique cleft-like area, foramen ovale, guarded by valve of foramen ovale, which is septum primum. Now the last step that happens, this should be that step number 6, obliteration of foramen ovale. So after birth, what happens is the lung circulation has established. So lung circulation is established. So blood in the pulmonary vein will reach where? It will reach this. These are the arrows of the pulmonary veins. They will reach the left atrium. The left atrium pressure will increase, and the left atrial pressure will be now more as compared to the right atrial pressure. So initially what the shunt was right to left, but now what will happen? Left to right shunt will be established. This valve of foramen ovale, the valve of foramen ovale was the remaining part of the septum primum. This will be pressed against the septum secundum because of the pressure, high pressure in the left atrium, and this blood shunt, which is towards from the left to right, this is going to press this valve to the septum secundum, and this obliterates this foramen ovale. So this passage, oblique passage that was created, foramen ovale is now obliterated. So this septum is fused in afterbirth. So no more passage of blood will be between the two atria. So these are the 6 steps of interatrial septum formation, and this is how in adult it will appear. The septum primum will form the fossa ovalis, and the septum secundum will form the annular ovalis or the limbus fossa ovalis. Now this is how the model of the septum primum in our department looks like, and this is how with the appearance of the septum secundum, this is how the model looks like. Now coming to the applied aspect, patent foramen ovale. Now what is patent foramen ovale? In 20% of cases, the septum primum and septum secundum fusion is incomplete. So it leaves a oblique cleft still. This is called as propatency of foramen ovale. Now coming to the congenital abnormalities of heart. This actually, if we see the cases of heart defects, we will find that 12% of all the heart defects are associated with chromosomal abnormality, and 33% of heart defects will definitely have chromosomal abnormalities. The causes of heart defects is multifactorial. It could be genetics, environmental factor. The major teratogens involved are rubella, thalidomide, alcohol, maternal diabetes. And what the target area for the effect of these teratogens and the genetic factors are the heart progenitors, PHF, primary heart field, secondary heart field, neural crest cells, endocardial cushions. These are the target areas of the heart defects. Then in the beginning, I talked about this gene NKX2.5. This is very important gene. Mutations in this can produce the atrial septal defects, tetralogy of Fallot's, atrioventricular conduction delays. So this is a very important genetic factor for the congenital abnormalities. Now again, coming to the most important part after the atrial septum development is the embryological basis of atrial septal defect. The atrial septal defects incidence is 6.4 per 10,000 births. Males are more predominantly affected by the atrial septal defects, and the child, as soon as is born, will come with cyanosis, because we know that the atrial septa was separating the left atrium from the right atrium. So the shunt, which is created from the right to left in the initial period, growing period of the embryo and the fetus, has to be closed. This shunt closes by the formation of the septum. But if the septum is still defective, then that shunt of the embryonic period, that is right to left shunt, will continue and will lead to cyanosis. So the child often comes with cyanosis. The types of atrial septal defects, these are the three common types of atrial septal defect. The ostium secundum defect. The second is the most severe form, the cor trilocular biventricular, in which you have a common atria. There is no septum secundum, no septum primum, no septum secundum. If only septum secundum is defective, it is an ostium secundum defect. If the last is the ostium primum defect. So now we'll learn these defects in detail now. The atrial septal defect, the first type, which is the ostium secundum type of a defect. This is the normal septum formation in which you can identify these are the septum secundum, the blue areas, and this is the septum primum. This is how the septum is formed. But what happens if there is, this is the septum secundum and this is the septum primum in this picture, same color coding has been applied over here also. So if there is excessive resorption of septum primum, you can see the septum primum which has to be till this point because it has to act like a valve for foramen ovale. This is the foramen ovale in which this is the acting like a valve, the septum primum. But if the septum primum is excessively resorbed, is excessively short, this can lead to a large gap in between, and this is called as the ostium secundum defect. And this is how it will appear. You can see the septum primum is quite resorbed, is absorbed, and this is leaving a large oval foramina, and this is called as the ostium secundum defect, the atrial septal defect. This is how it appears. The second cause of the same type of defect is when there is failure of development of septum primum. If the septum primum is failed to level up, you can see over here, this can also lead to the atrial septum defect, which is the ostium secundum type of a defect. Now, in the second part, which is the most severe part, if there is, you can see there is no septum primum, no septum secundum. There is a complete failure of formation of both the septa. Then this can lead to a common atrial chamber, and there you can imagine no shunting, prevention of shunt is taking place, intermixing of blood is taking place between the two atrias. The third type of ostium secundum, the third type of defect is of ASD, atrial septal defect, is ostium primum defect. This ostium primum defect appears when there is partial closure of atrioventricular canal. So this is, you can see this is the atrioventricular canal area. The atrioventricular canal, the anterior and posterior cushions should have closed together to separate the two canals. But if there is partial closure of atrioventricular canal, then it can lead to, because the AV cushions were also contributing to the formation of the interatrial septum, remember, so it will be associated, there will be an associated tricuspid valve abnormality also along with the ostium primum defect. So this is the ostium primum defect. So this is how in our fetal autopsy we found a ostium secundum defect. We can see correlate this with this over here. The septum, very short septum primum was there, and this is a picture of a fetal which is nearly in the third trimester. So by till now, if you can see this much large oval foramen, it's definitely atrial septal defect. So it has got very short septum primum, and this is how the atrial septal defect appears in this fetus. The foramen ovale, which has to close postnatally, that is after birth, may close in fetal life as well. This is a very rare condition, but the affected fetus will usually die with prenatal closure of foramen ovale. The other abnormality is the dextrocardia. Dextrocardia is when we were doing the primary heart field, the secondary heart field, I said that the heart tube when it was forming, it was also forming with a patterning sequence, left to right patterning sequence. So this which was corresponding with the left to right laterality of the body also. So in this fetus, while dissecting, we encountered that you can see this apex of heart should face towards the left side, but it is facing to the right side. Also, when we looked into the liver, the right lobe of all the abdominal viscera were also onto the opposite side. So this is a case of situs inversus totalis. So only if it is limited to the heart, it is called as the dextrocardia, left to right, the patterning if disturbed. And if it is to the entire viscera, then it is the situs inversus viscerum. Now we are at the end of our lecture. So we did the heart tube, its folding. So you should be able to answer by now all the parts of the heart tube, derivatives of the sinus venosus, development of interatrial septum, which was quite extensive, and you should know it by heart, how it formed with the formation of the septum primum, ostium secundum, septum secundum, formation of foramen ovale, and then the obliteration of foramen ovale. And once you know this interatrial septum development in detail, you will be able to do the atrial septal defect also. Thank you.